Welcome to Cell Culture Community, where we explore how science and technology can transform our health. This episode is coming a little late because I was at IIT Gandhinagar for a couple of weeks working on biology modules for education in middle and high school classrooms. It was fascinating work. Today, we're exploring an important topic in women's health: breast cancer. With 2.3 million cases in 2022, it's the most common cancer among women. Interestingly, 2.3 million was also the exact count for neonatal deaths we discussed a few episodes ago. While neonatal health gets a lot of attention in global health spaces, and rightly so, cancer has been overlooked as a disease of affluence. But it's on the rise, especially in developing countries, since their socioeconomic development usually goes hand in hand with the emergence of risk factors like increased tobacco use, pollution, obesity, and other lifestyle changes. The burden of breast cancer is not only growing, but also unevenly distributed. Women in countries with a lower human development index are 50% less likely to receive a diagnosis, but 50% more likely compared to the prevalence rate in developed countries to die of breast cancer. And this discrepancy is because of late diagnosis and poor access to treatment. Our guest for today is Dr. Geetha Manjunath, founder, CEO, and CTO of Niramai Health Analytics. She has created a novel AI-based cancer diagnostic that's low-cost, portable, and non-invasive. It's a really amazing example of a technology based in India, based in a developing country that's leading the world, technically speaking. Coming up in this conversation, we discuss why more women don't get screened, how our company stays competitive in an age where anyone can train AI, and how Niramai has adapted for low resource settings and the US FDA alike. Dr. Geetha, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Smriti. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
So I know this is a question you've answered in other interviews, but just for our audience, what inspired you to work in this space?
I mean, it's a good turning point in my life. I'm a computer scientist. I used to head AI research for Xerox Corporation as a lab director. I had a wonderful team to work with, wonderful problems, being solved for the world using AI and machine learning. All was good. And one day I just heard that my very close cousin sister, more a friend, Bharti, got detected with late stage breast cancer. And that was hugely shocking. I'd never seen anyone so close to me suffer with cancer in general. So that's when I started reading about it. Wanted to see how I can help her, of course, as well. And fortunately, it was stage 4, and so she couldn't live long after that detection. So that troubled me a lot. Reading more about what is the current scene, I realized that breast cancer is one of the most curable of all the cancers, but we're losing so many women to it. So that's why I said, okay, why don't I start a research in this direction, got all the management permission, and of course, put up a proposal, and started initially as a part of my previous organization. And after about less than a year or so, I realized that this required complete focus, right? Working along with the 30 other projects is not going to help. And so I quit my job and started Niramai. It's been 7 years now. I didn't know what I was doing, just jumping off from a well-settled job, but I definitely knew what I wanted to do. So it's been a long journey, and I guess a very fruitful journey, where we have now developed a new method of detecting breast cancer made in India for the world.
Yeah, your anecdote reminds me, this is also mentioned on your website, incident rates for breast cancer in women below 40 are increasing really quickly. In your 7 years of reading about this space and working in it, have you been able to understand why that's happening? It's really concerning from a public health perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's extremely concerning, especially in India. The mean age for breast cancer incidences is almost 10 years younger than the world average. And also, the current methods for testing for breast cancer are usually recommended above 45 years of age, such as mammography or ultrasound or MRI and so on. It's true that higher the age, it is higher probability of or risk for cancer. But in breast cancer, we see almost 27 to 30% of cases under 45 years, which is huge. And in India, this percentage is actually higher. While we don't know the reason, there's a lot of studies being done. Some of it could be attributed to the stress levels of people who have to manage both family and outside work here. Of course, it's similar in many other countries, but in India, it's more expectation of a female to do a lot of things at home. There's also late menopause and early menarche, we say. That is, starting the periods much earlier and staying on for long would make our body more, full of hormones, And more recently, we are seeing change in lifestyle. I may sound very old when we say westernization, but it's true that there's a lot of habits of drinking and smoking, even in young ladies. That is definitely not a great thing for cancer. And also, not having children, very, very late marriage and not having children.
I was surprised to learn that one's risk of breast cancer goes down the more children they have and the more months they breastfeed.
So maybe that is also the reason for increased incidences in breast cancer. But the real silver lining or a gold lining for this is that it is absolutely curable. Nobody needs to die of breast cancer. The only thing we need to make sure is that we detect it early enough. Sometimes it could just be an outpatient procedure with a vacuum tube biopsy, and then you can get cured and go back home. So this is feasible, possible. The only thing is that every person needs to do a regular testing of their breast, whether there is a symptom or not, whether somebody has had cancer in the family or not. Just go for the regular checkup once a year. Stage 1 detection has 95% survival rate beyond 5 years. A stage 3, stage 4 has 10% survival rate even within 5 years. So that's the difference a stage of detection can make.
Wow. I'm thinking there's so many mental barriers to getting screening. Just a few weeks ago, my mother's annual health checkup was due, and she's in her early 50s now. And she had one really bad experience of a very painful mammography from 10 years ago or something like that. And so she was so hesitant, and we were going back and forth about it. And I knew about thermolytics, so I told her about that. And I think she came around eventually. But anyways, I've experienced that personally in my family. It's a very, at least traditional mammography, it can feel very uncomfortable for someone. Over the years, and especially at the beginning, what were the barriers you identified that are stopping women from getting screened regularly and early?
Yeah. So I think what you mentioned is right on the dot. That is one of the main reasons. That is the user experience of current methodologies, which requires compression, radiation, removing clothes in front of others every year. I mean, these are very, very uncomfortable, especially for people from India and countries where there's a lot of hesitation for women to be very free with other people. This traditionally has been one of the main reasons. Also in countries in Middle East, for example, there people don't want to be touched as well, even for fever. Right? So this kind of a privacy requirement is one of the main reasons why many people are not going in for regular screening. They may do one mammogram, but then they don't come back, like you mentioned in your mother's case. We've seen many such cases. It was interesting that once I was just trying it out on fellow female cohort founders. Like basically we had a accelerator program. There were like 5 of us, and we said, why don't we try out each other's test or whatever product we have developed for others. And then when I was trying this out on my own colleague, right, then it was very uncomfortable for me to ask her to disrobe, or she was also not comfortable disrobing in front. So I put a curtain in between. So one of the value propositions we have made now, developing from this experience, is that our test is completely privacy aware, right? Nobody sees or touches the person during this test. which is so important for breast screening to be accepted and done regularly by many many women. So we have a booth like structure. The lady enters, she sits in front of the device, but then she closes all side. It could be a curtain or a door depending upon the situation where we are doing the screening. And then going inside, she actually removes her clothes. She sits in front of this device. The device is also not touching her. It's like a passport photography session where it's like far off. There's no photographer. There's nobody there. The control of the device is happening from outside the kiosk.
Mammographies also require a skilled technician and come with radiation risk. Geetha deeply understood women's experiences with mammography, allowing Niramai to overcome multiple barriers at once. It's privacy aware, uses thermal imaging instead of X-ray, making it radiation-free and lower in cost, and its AI algorithm allows its usage by low-skilled workers.
So this kind of a no see, no touch, no radiation, no pain is something that's making a lot more women adopt.
Next, we hear about Dr. Geetha's journey, from reading papers about an obscure form of imaging in her free time to building a validated, safe, and competitive medical device.
So coming back to your question on how was it before, I read a lot on the web and figured out there is something called thermal imaging, which is non-invasive, and it did have some signs of detecting breast cancer early, but there was no systematic study. So that's when we said, okay, why don't we test whether it's really working? Because we were in science and technology research and so on. We did have a multispectral camera which could be, set to actually take the images in infrared spectrum. So we set that up and then actually requested our doctor collaborator to see if can we actually image two breast cancer patients. And he said, yeah, tomorrow two of them are going for a surgery. I'll request them. And so we had informal consent, I would say, to our pleasant surprise, right? So we actually could make out a huge pattern around the place where she was actually going to get a surgery done next day. One is to read papers, another is to actually see and experience it yourself, right? So after that, I said, obviously, two people are not sufficient enough. So we set up a full collaboration with the hospital, with formal, what you call as IEC, Institutional Ethics Committee rep, to image many more people who were detected with breast cancer already. We wanted to kind of validate that this technology is able to detect those. So it was more like a pilot study for about 78 patients. For each of these patients, we sat with the doctors to figure out where is cancer you have detected, how does mammography look like for this, and so on and so forth. And we figured out that it is possible to look at high focal increase in temperature and then map it to this. But that was not sufficient, though we actually wrote up a small imaging algorithm to sort of figure out where are the high temperature points. We figured out that, we need even negative patients to actually, say whether it's working or not. Who is going to come and stand in front of our thermal imaging device when they don't have an abnormality? And the first person was a nurse herself who was actually doing the imaging for us. So from then on, we started off. I Googled a lot and figured out that there is one doctor called Dr. Ram Prakash sir, who was actually a trained thermographer. Over the 9 years, he had just screened 300 people. But he did have some experience, so we went to him. We learned the theory of how that works from a doctor. We also leveraged his existing data, to actually start building machine learning based, because we realized that many negative patients were also called out as positive with an imaging algorithm. So we had to do a machine learning based, AI based software for it. So we started developing that. Then on, it's been a long journey. We have figured out that there were a couple of positive patients which were not detected. There were no focal increased temperature. So we had to add more features. We also brought in a completely new method of identifying vascularity, blood vessel activity from a thermal signature, and then using the vascularity to figure out if there is a possible deep tumor or not. So all of that, over time we added because we went on doing multiple clinical studies. It was absolutely necessary. If you go to a doctor and say, here is a new technique, go start prescribing it to your your patients. Then the doctor is like, I've never heard about this technique. I know thermography has been used, but it's not so great, and so on. So we had to really create proof points, first of all, to ourselves that it actually works. We did very, very systematic, blinded studies where we were not even involved. Every person took our test, followed by all the standard of care tests, mammography, ultrasound, and biopsy if needed. And then at the end of the study cycle recruitment, we actually compared. It's almost like an answer key check. And then the doctors started believing.
Initially, their device was most readily accepted in low resource areas with a high need.
First, we actually did in low risk conditions like go to a rural area or a urban system, but more like a screening camp where hand examination is used. So hand examination will only detect stage 2 plus. So we said, okay, you do that, what you're doing, but in addition, do our test, and we'll tell you if there is more, right? And so that's how we started Karnataka Cancer Society. Then, after doing a lot of outreach camps and seeing that there is a benefit coming in, we got accepted by hospitals, tumor boards. So, yeah, this is how it all started. Those who want to do any clinical innovation, I would really, urge them to actually think about how to actually prove to yourself and to the doctors that it actually works in a very, very unbiased. Right now, we always love our technology. It's always easy to say, yeah, that false negative is, it has to be false. No. At the end of the day, you are responsible for, in case you miss any cancer, patient's final issue. It's very important to do systematic clinical studies with the right protocol for comparison. I think that's very, very important. That's something, completely new to me.
Sounds like an amazing journey. And I can't imagine it being technically straightforward either because, there's a lot of data sets you can take online and throw any AI at it. And it's very hard to get to the accuracy levels that work in a clinical context. Is there anything you can share about the technical development process? What were some of the hard problems there?
But you got the right point. So you said we can download data and then start building. Unfortunately, or I guess it's fortunately for us, there's absolutely no thermal data available on the web. It was the first time somebody was taking a serious look at thermal based breast imaging. Yes, we did find a small data set from Brazil, but it didn't have any ground truth associated with it. So it's not that useful. So every bit of data we used for training was collected by us. So we determine how the labeling is done. Like typically, when you do, let's say, a chest X-ray machine learning model development to see if there is, let's say, lung cancer or not, the way you would do it is yes, download the chest X-rays available. If there is labeled data, great. Otherwise, show it to three doctors. Ask them is there anything abnormal, and then do a consolidated labeling. But here, if I showed a thermal imaging image to a person, there's no doctor who could confidently say whether there's an abnormality or not. So we had to actually make every person go through until biopsy. So it was blessing in disguise because we ended up getting tissue labeling for our imaging, which is very rare for any machine learning problem. So we ended up being more sensitive and more accurate than the doctors, definitely more sensitive and more accurate than even mammography, which was a comparator. So I think two parts to it. One is every bit of training data was collected by us, which actually took a lot of time. I remember the first study for 258 patients took us 1.5 years to collect. The second part is we also happen to sit on a very unique data set which nobody else had. Right? If somebody else has to do it, they have to go through all of this again. We got what we call as entry barrier. We maintain that leadership position even now. We're the only company in the world who has 1 million breast thermal images today. Doctor, in fact, I had presented to even American Academy of Dermatology. When I put that up at that time, was 50,000 people done. Like I had responses with 4 exclamation marks and so on and so forth, because unlike other techniques, this was not yet fully established at that time. And we managed to do all of these within a few years just as a single company. So that has been our value proposition. And the third aspect, what you also mentioned, is the accuracy levels. As you can't have a false negative because you would leave a person with cancer roaming around, right? On the other side, we also should not have too many false positives, because unnecessarily calling somebody as a positive, can actually have some psychological effect. So we decided, along with the doctors' consultations, that it is important to have a screening methodology which does not miss any cancer. And of course, we have to check the number of false positives, keep a check on it. Having said that, we wanted to make sure sensitivity is close to 100%, whereas specificity, which is 100 minus false positives, could be maybe about 85 to 90% is okay, because it's important to identify who are likely to be positive and put them onto the next level test. Until you do a biopsy, you don't know. So that's why we are positioned as a screening test. If somebody is positive, it doesn't mean it's always cancer. So that way they are happy to go for the next level test. And next level test is something that anyway everyone needs to do, which is a mammogram or ultrasound. It's not any harmful thing that we are recommending. And when we say no, it's usually a no. That is, a negative predictive value is very high. So with that kind of a claim, we are able to get to many, many hospitals and now more countries beyond India as well.
And you're collecting a lot of data and probably talking to some of these patients yourself. Apart from the image data, was there any demographic data that ended up being relevant?
Absolutely. So we do have different scores, which is likelihood of malignancy scores based on thermal data. We also have demography information like age, family, cancer history, and so on, which anyway the person can share. And if they share, we have another score which uses the risk factors as well. We don't want to leave any person who looks little bit high risk on the ground, right? So if we feel that that person requires, based on the family cancer history, complaints, and existing lump, and so on, if we feel that there is high vascularity that requires follow-up diagnostic, we will let them know. And also, there's a gradation of scoring. So in breast imaging, there is a scoring called BIRADS scoring, which is American College of Radiology guidance. So similar, metric, we call it B score for Bharat score, is actually used. So that way, the level of concern that we think the tool takes. People don't have to be alarmed with it, but take their diagnostic workup more seriously. Another way to think about it is there are so many women who need to be screened every year. Only 2% of them are getting screened. We are nudging the 98% of them to go and get it done. Not everybody, at least for those who are high risk. So that way, we are not doing any harm.
I was struck by how much thought and effort went into Niramai's development. This wasn't someone casually throwing fancy ML models at a wall to see what will stick. 3 technical elements stood out. 1, they collected large amounts of high-quality data, annotated with ground reality and not just doctors' calls. 2, they identified parameters beyond heat intensity, such as demography and vascularity, to provide patients more information and accuracy. And 3, they managed medical risk versus benefit extremely effectively by tuning their algorithm to be highly sensitive and starting off in populations that stood to gain the most, where the status quo was a hand exam or no diagnosis at all. In the next part of this conversation, we discuss the challenges Niramai overcame integrating their product into diverse workflows, from hospitals to screening camps. And so once you did your initial validation studies and you started taking this out to hospitals, maybe some screening agencies, how was the reception, and was there any learning or iteration at that stage as well?
We have done almost 4 or 5 full clinical studies in India, another one in Africa, another one in Europe, another one just completed in the US. So we've done quite a few clinical studies and multi-site also, not in one hospital, because people will start suspecting. In addition to that, some of the doctors wanted to evaluate on their own patients. Even now, sometimes if you go to a big hospital, they do that. And we also decided to publish in international journals. So it is considered as international quality peer-reviewed journals. But having said that, even now, sometimes, we see a lot of insecurity in the radiologists, trying to see, oh, you are trying to replace my mammography. I've studied, I've left my job. Honestly, it's very concerning to see the doctors concerned about their profession more than the patients, to be honest. And first time I'm coming out and saying this, but it's true. I mean, I have many, many doctors who come in and say, you're taking away my profession. No, we are not. You're only going to get you more patients so that you can make more money, if you want to think of it that way, right? So, so this has been a problem, honestly, Smiti. Hopefully, we will get over it sooner. Now, many, many radiologists are supporting this because they see the value that we provide. Because mammography is great. Honestly, that was the only tool that was available so far. But it does have limitations, and it is not the limitation that Geetha is talking about. It is the world knows in dense tissue, where it is like younger women or women with dense tissue, even above 45, cannot find cancer with mammography. So, if a lady has fatty breasts, she's above 60, please, she should go for a mammogram. I'm not trying to sort of replace anything. But actually, I think for screening, I think we do have a good test that we have developed. So that's the messaging. If the hospital already has invested in a mammogram, I said it's fine. You please do the test for women above 45, under 45. You send them here or use this for outreach. We have to sort of position it in a way based on what the comfort of the doctor is. But we're very happy to so many of the doctors who have just gone with what is useful, what is important for the patients. Many, many key opinion leaders are endorsing our solution because they realize that India cannot afford to have a mammographic screening for everyone with the few number of radiologists we have. It's not feasible for India and many, many developing countries. So many doctors are supporting it.
India's ratio of radiologists to patients is severely imbalanced. It's at 1:1 lakh compared with 1:10,000 in the US. In this next segment, we dive into Niramai's outreach work in low-resource communities. When you started designing this, did you always know it's something you want to be, kind of go from the full spectrum of the private urban hospital all the way to rural screening camps, perhaps with the community health workers? Did that slowly unfold? And are there different needs that the women have?
Sure. No, initially we thought this has to be a test in a hospital or a diagnostic center. When we discussed with Karnataka Cancer Society and realized that it is only hand examination being done in rural areas, we figured out that because it is portable, we can carry a cooler along as well. And we created a booth-like structure. So all those have been sort of an evolution, I would say. And then we realized that there is a lot of value outside the hospital as well. And in fact, easy acceptance is seen outside the hospital, to be frank, right? That because there's nothing else in there. The next process is the hand, and maybe there are a couple of one device or so, which is also having a lot of false positives and missing many cancers. Having said that, yes, the needs of outreach is different from the needs of a screening done in a hospital setting. To be more precise, right? When we were doing with Karnataka Cancer Society, I still remember one of the camps we did in Kolar, right? There was one Sharadamma who was sounding like, a positive person. At that time, every screening that was done was going to, our reports were going to a doctor for review. So we used to take 1 week to get back with the result. But by that time, we lost that Sharadamma. There were two Sharadammas and the addresses and phone numbers were not working, all of that. So that made me realize that it's important to have instant reporting. So we improvised the algorithms to have higher sensitivity. That is, it's okay to bring a couple of more people to the hospital. That is, err on the positive side. And the second one was the cost aspect of it, right? Mammogram is costing about 3,500 to 4,000 rupees in a hospital setting, and we had decided to place it at 50% of that cost in a hospital setting. But when we went to a rural setting, obviously that is also very, very expensive. So one is, can we reduce the cost? Yeah, but then there's so much of other costs that is associated with developing this, regulatory clinical studies and all this. So we came up with a new idea of differential reporting. What I mean is that the answer is going to be the same. Whether the person is abnormal or not is going to be the same. But the amount of information about this abnormality we share is different, right? So in a rural area, when we are triaging and giving instant report, we just give a red, yellow, green, or the risk score, and that's about it. Whereas in a hospital setting, we gave a full 3-page report. Some tech audience, they would have heard about explainable AI. It's not sufficient for the machine to say, hey, she's positive. Like, we have to explain the result. Just because the doctors were asking, why are you giving it a positive, tell me more, we actually got got into the explainability of the result. So our reports are extremely explainable, saying this is positive because of vascular abnormality, or a milk duct abnormality, and here's a lump, and that's why the lump is active. So we give a lot of explanation of the results so the doctors feel comfortable. So all of this explainability is available only in a diagnostic center or a hospital setting, whereas in a rural setting, we just give a red, yellow, green, and that is sufficient. There is no printer to print 3-page report anyway, right? All we want to do is bring them to here. So this is another innovation we did. In fact, Harvard Business Review really loved this, and we had a couple of case studies happening in different IIMs and also HBR. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, it sounds like you managed to keep some differentiation between the different price levels, but also give accessibility.
Correct. And then the person who is paying low price, right, is getting lower information. So that way, there's no cannibalization or unfairness also. So this was something that we innovated. I think whenever there is an innovation and almost, if I can use the word disruption, we need to innovate around all the elements, not just tech, the business development, business modeling, marketing. How do we kind of, even explain this new concept to people? So innovation, I think everywhere.
Geetha adapted her solution from the hospital to the screening camp by introducing instant reporting, increased sensitivity at the cost of a few false positives, and by innovating on pricing. She also created a new version of her product to gain quick FDA clearance in the US. You created a specific product, Smile, which is a slightly different version of thermolytics for the FDA process in the US. What did you have to change in this Smile product? And how do you think about the fact that maybe something you're using in India is not going to get cleared in the US?
So the US FDA has been a great experience so far. We always think like FDA is strict and FDA is bad, but what I realized over time is that they're extremely smart. They are obviously protecting the health and safety of the people. Coming to the exact question of Smile 100 and thermolytics actually gives these scores to a doctor to quickly review and say whether there's an abnormality or not. It's also kind of indicative of whether it's a benign or malignant lesion. When we took this device to FDA, there is a wonderful process called pre-sub. That is, before you submit your application, you can ask questions to FDA. This pre-sub process we used, and we took this and said, oh my God, this is too innovative. We want to be able to look at every line of your code, every line of your design, and then do a large-scale study in the US. And it costs quite a bit of money. And we said, okay, we will go through it, but we will do it like in about a year or two. Meanwhile, let's figure out what is the minimal thing that US FDA thinks it's safe. Smile 100 was born from the other end of the spectrum. What kind of minimal features can be introduced, which is similar to existing thermal cameras, and maybe a little bit smartness in the software so that it is actually useful, and not so smart that FDA thinks there is a huge risk. So the difference is that we don't have major AI scores in Smile. It is a visualization tool where we mark the area of high thermal activity, and the doctor decides whether the high thermal activity is cancer or not. That is not a decision or even a scoring that we do, which is fine, because in US, the amount of mammography, the number of mammography machines that are out there, and the amount of effort that the country takes to get everyone onto a mammographic regime is huge. So we always consider our devices adjunct to mammogram for dense tissue women for developed countries. So Smile 100 we positioned as an adjunct device. We will help identify some high thermal activities, and the doctor can decide whether it's abnormal or not based on additional tests that they do. Whereas thermalytics is absolutely critically necessary in countries like India, Africa, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, where they really love the product as it is, and we've got all the clearances needed for it.
Yeah, the need is so different, is what I'm realizing. Of course, they'll have a higher standard if they don't have this kind of. It's always a risk and benefit analysis, right? So if they don't need the benefits that much, then it will be a stricter analysis in some sense. In this last section, we switch gears to learn about her personal journey as an entrepreneur and what she does to take care of herself. So just switching gears a little bit, you were talking about, there's a lot of innovation to do in terms of business. And this was something where you were moving from a technical role to being a founder. In the startup world, we talk about what are the risks that a startup has when it starts out. So I'm curious what you feel has been the biggest risk in this work and how that risk has evolved or maybe just become de-risked over time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, yes, I was a techie, but actually also a senior lead management personnel. So, I knew all of that, but that is developing product and managing team and so on and so forth. But what I didn't know was the sort of the regulatory landscape of medical devices. I mean, we had put up a lot of proposals to get funds for our projects as a business plan and all, but not from investors, so mostly from within the company. So there's this financial cushion, right? Salary coming in, and we had to kind of really study from zero, I would say, to do this. And it's always fun. The good part, let me say the good part and then come to the risk. So the good part is you have a lot of autonomy in terms of moving forward. I imagine myself sitting on a driving seat and wonderful co-drivers with me, with a completely, long road in front where there's no traffic. That's the feel of a startup. You can actually go very, very fast. And of course, we have to be careful about bumps along the way and put the brakes as needed. But that's sort of is a power of being an entrepreneur. The flip side, of course, is that you are the whole and soul. You need to do everything, you need to know everything. So you need to reach out to people who know, learn things, and depend on people who you have realized are experts in certain fields. So this kind of being open to comments, inputs, but not carried away by all the inputs that you get is one challenging but fun stuff that happens. From a risking perspective for the product itself, I think the main risk is the clinical risk, that whether the product works or not. So this clinical studies would be the main way of de-risking the product. But otherwise, everything else is running well. um, Sometimes you have things like COVID come in and sweep away your pockets. So it does have its own challenges and uh, high tides coming in. We have to be resilient, standing firm, believe in what we are doing, stay put, be persistent, address the most important issue at that particular, most urgent and important issue at that particular time. And there will be back burners. I'm not saying I did the right thing all the time, but you can do the best possible in the context of the whole thing, right? So it's been a good journey so far. We cannot say the same size or same techniques work for all. I would just say that you just be open to learn new things from everyone, not just getting carried away by a like love for your technology. That is important. And there will always be ups and downs, right? And I have this mantra of whatever happens is for good. Like, it can be as bad, like as you start almost like start crying, but still, this is for good. So that kind of a optimistic view helps you, keep on taking on more and more hurdles or whatever challenge that comes. It's almost like walking up like a trekking or a mountaineering, adventure rather than walking on a smooth road. It's fun.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people will be interested to hear these inputs because Niramai's journey is, I'm sure you've seen the hardest parts of it, but from the outside, it's really a remarkable journey. Traditionally, medical technologies take 10, 15, 20 years to get from bench to bedside. So for a technology to be so well validated and then, the way you've managed to really put it out into the world in all kinds of audiences for all kinds of patients is extremely remarkable journey.
Thank you. And last but not the least, it's a made in India product, and we have 35 granted patents. Okay,
Wow.
so this has been a proud moment for an Indian in me.
But great conversation, and I'll be thinking about a lot from this. I always end with this slightly more personal question. What's something simple you do every day for your own health or the health of your family, neighborhood, however you want to answer that?
Thanks for asking that. I do two things. One is eat right, right? That's been recent, I would say. Eat right, eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, and try to keep sugar away. That's sort of the food part of it. But yeah, there are times where I hog a lot of sugar as well. It's not like I'm also, but I try to do as much as possible. Um, while I keep telling everyone you have to walk 15 minutes every day, I used to do it, but there are many times I miss it. I need to, after this, I will be more regular, I guess. But one thing that I really, attribute to the peace of mind and the controlling of the stress or keeping ourselves stress free to work is the yoga and pranayam. 15 minutes. I follow the Art of Living Sudarshan Kriya every day. If I don't do it, I know it's a different Geetha. So that 15 minutes of breathing exercises, Sudarshan Kriya, is a must for me. Absolutely. Even if I don't eat food, it's okay. That's a must.
That makes sense. Yeah, I guess that everyone has to find their own stress managing tools. Thank you for coming onto the show and sharing all your learnings with us.
Thank you, Smriti. It's been wonderful to be on your show. And I wish everyone in your audience good health and, urge them to take care of their breast health more as well. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. If you like this episode, leave a rating and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow us for more conversations on how science and technology can transform our health. Till then, breathe deep, stretch something that feels stiff, and look around. Notice something curious, delightful, or in need of care. We are gifted with so many chances to love and wonder every day.